Hello dear learners, welcome you all to e-learning platform. We are in week 4. In this lesson you will learn part 3 of Heart of Darkness. Me Faisal Ahmed, faculty member Department of English, World University of Bangladesh, throughout this lecture with you. Let's begin. In this video lecture you will learn 2 lessons, and in another video you will learn the rest part of the lesson 3 and lesson 4. So in lesson 1 you will learn paraphrasing of part 3. In lesson 2 you will learn text and part analysis. And the next video you will learn lesson 3 and 4. Lesson 3 major themes, symbols and characters analysis. And lesson 4 you will learn racism and ethical issues in Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness, lesson 1, paraphrase of part 3. Marlowe stares at the Russian in astonishment and thinks that the Russian surely wants nothing from the wilderness but space to breathe in, and that if the absolutely pure, uncalculating, and practical spirit of adventure had ever ruled the human being, it ruled this yacht. Meanwhile, the Russian begs Marlowe to take Kurtz away quickly. He tells of his first meeting with Kurtz, in which Kurtz talked of everything, and the Russian only listened. Since then, he says, he's nursed Kurtz through 2 illnesses, even though Kurtz had once threatened to shoot him over some ivory. Kurtz, the Russian, says, is a god to the local tribesmen, who adore him. They help him as he raids the jungle and other tribes for ivory. This comes as troubling news to Marlowe, who had expected that Kurtz, with his morals, would trade for ivory, not take it by force. The Russian says that Kurtz can be just as other men are. He adds that Kurtz suffered too much. He hated all these and somehow couldn't get away. Marlowe meanwhile lifts binoculars to his eyes and looks at the building where he thinks Kurtz is lying ill. He is startled to see that what he thought were fence posts are actually spiked human heads. অর্থাৎ কুর্চ তার বাড়ির কাছে তার যে একটা ফেন্স ছিল, বেড়া ছিল, সেই ফেন্সের উপরে যারা তার আদেশ অমান্য করত তাদেরকে হত্যা করত এবং তাদের মাথাগুলো সেই ফেন্সের উপরে ঝুলিয়ে রাখত. Marlowe tells the man on the Nelly that for all Kurtz's magnificent talent, eloquence and learning, he was hollow at the core, and the jungle filled that hollowness. The Russian mentions that when the native chiefs came to see Kurtz, they crawled up to him. This information disgusts Marlowe, who comments that, in contrast, uncomplicated savagery was a positive relief, being something that had the right to exist, obviously in the sunshine. The Russian can't understand Marlowe's scorn at Kurtz's savage actions. He says that the company abandoned Kurtz, who had such wonderful ideas. The pilgrims come out of the house bearing Kurtz on its stretcher. So the last scene, part 3, part 3, Kurtz is severely ill. So he is about to die. That's why the pilgrims come out of the house bearing Kurtz on a stretcher. Marlowe describes Kurtz as looking like an animated image of death carved out of ivory. The natives swarm forward. The Russian whispers to Marlowe that if Kurtz Says the word, they will all be killed. Kurz speaks. Marlowe can't hear him from so far away, and the natives melt back into the jungle. Along the shore of the river near the ship, the natives gather. Among them, next to the ship, a savage and superb African woman paces back and forth. The Russian's comments about her imply that she was Kurt's black mistress. Inside the cabin, an argument erupts between Kurtz and the general manager. Kurtz accuses the general manager of caring less about Kurtz himself than about the ivory Kurtz has, and also says the general manager with his piddling notions is interfering with Kurtz's grand plans. The general manager exits from the cabin. He tells Marlowe that Kurtz is very ill and that Kurtz's unsound methods ruin the district for the company. Marlowe comments that Kurtz's methods couldn't be unsound because he seemed to have had no method at all. Yet Marlowe is more disgusted by the general manager's fake show of sadness at Kurtz's demise than with Kurtz's atrocities, and says that Kurtz is still a remarkable man. This losses Marlowe whatever favor he had held in the general manager's eyes. When Marlowe is alone, the Russian approaches. He has decided to slip away, correctly sensing that he is in danger from the general manager and his men, and seeing nothing more that he can do for Kurtz. But before departing, he tells Marlowe that it was Kurtz who ordered the native attack on the steamship in order to scare the general manager away and thereby be allowed to remain at his station. The Russian gets Marlowe to give him some supplies and disappears into the night with their steamship. Marlowe goes to sleep but wakes suddenly just after midnight. As he looks around, he notices Kurtz has disappeared. On the bank of the river, Marlowe finds a trail through the grass and realizes Kurtz must be crawling. He catches up to Kurtz just before he reaches the native camp. Marlowe realizes that though he is stronger than Kurtz, all Kurtz has to do is call out and the natives will attack. Kurtz, realizing the same thing, tells him to hide. Marlowe says, "You will be lost, utterly lost." Kurtz pauses, struggling with himself. Marlowe watches him and realizes that Kurtz is perfectly sane in his mind, but his soul is mad. Kurtz's soul, Marlowe says, knew no restraint, no faith, and no fear. Yet in the inn, Kurtz allows Marlowe to support him back to the ship. And Marlowe was trying to take Kurtz to Europe back again, though Kurtz's mind remained in the darkness of Congo with ivory due to his greedy nature. The next day the ship departs. Kurtz in the pilot house with Marlowe watches the natives and his mistress come to the shore. Marlowe spots the pilgrims getting their rifles and pulls the steam whistle. All the natives but the women disperse. The pilgrims open fire, blocking Marlowe's vision with the smoke. As they travel swiftly downstream, the general manager is pleased. After all, soon Kurtz will be dead, and the general manager will be secure in his position without having to do a thing. Marlowe is often left alone with Kurtz, who speaks in his magnificent voice and with his magnificent eloquence about his moral ideas, his hopes for fame in Europe, and his desire to wring the heart of the jungle. The steamship soon breaks down, which doesn't surprise Marlowe, but Kurtz becomes concerned he won't live to see Europe. He gives Marlowe his papers, fearful that the general manager might try to pry into them, and one day tells Marlowe that he is waiting for death. Marlowe is pierced by the expression on Kurt's face of somber pride, of ruthless power, of craven terror, of an intense and hopeless despair. হতাশা, শুধু হতাশা তার মধ্যে ছিল, কারণ তার মন পড়েছিল সেই কঙ্গোতে, কিন্তু যদিও মারলো তাকে, তার স্থায়ী বাসস্থান ইউরোপের বেলজিয়ামে নিয়ে যাচ্ছিল। Suddenly Kurtz cries out in a voice not much more than a breath, "The horror, the horror!" A short while later, the general manager's servant appears and informs everyone, "Mr. Kurtz is dead." So in this last part 3, Kurtz মারা যায়, এবং Kurtz মারা যাওয়ার মধ্যে দিয়ে উপন্যাসটি সমাপ্তি হয়। Marlowe returns to the sepulchral city. এখানে sepulchral city উপকর্তে বলা হয়েছে ইউরোপিয়ান সিটি, সাদা ঝকঝকে চকচকে কিন্তু ভিতরে হলোনেস, অর্থাৎ তাদের মোরাল ডিগ্রেডেশন, ইউরোপিয়ানদের যে মোরাল ডিগ্রেডেশন, সেজন্যই এই সিম্বলিক নামটা ইউজ করা হয়েছে sepulchral city, বেলজিয়ামের উপকর্তে ব্যবহার হয়েছে। Marlowe returns to the sepulchral city in Europe, where his aunt nurses him back to health, but can't soothe his mind. The people of the city seem to him petty and silly. A representative of the company comes to get Kurt's papers from Marlowe, who offers him only on the suppression of savage customs, with their scowl is exterminate all the brutes, torn off. The representative, wanting more, wanting something more profitable, storms off. Kurt's cousin soon shows up. The cousin, a musician, tells Marlowe that Kurtz was himself a great musician, then leaves with some family letters Marlowe gives him. Marlowe, full of pity, does not dispute her claims. Finally, the intended, Marlowe's Kurt's fiancée is called intended, অর্থাৎ intended একজন ইউরোপিয়ান নারী, বেলজিয়ান নারী, যার সাথে কুর্টসের আগে বিয়ে হওয়ার কথা ছিল, এঙ্গেজমেন্ট হয়ে গিয়েছিল, এবং সেই নারী কুর্টসের জন্য তার সারা জীবনই অপেক্ষা করেছিলেন। Finally, the intended asks to hear Kurt's last words. This is the question Marlowe's been dreading. He pauses, then tells her that Kurt's last words are her name. She cries out that she knew it and begins to weep. Marlowe feels only despair, knowing he failed to give Kurtz the justice he deserved. But he just couldn't get himself to tell the intended the truth. It would have been too dark. Marlowe on the Nelly হচ্ছে তাদের স্টিমশিপের নাম। Marlowe on the Daily, still at anchor in the Thames, goes quiet. The narrator looks off into the distance and says that the Thames নদী একটা অংশ যেটা পুরো ইউরোপ জুড়েই, that the Thames, লন্ডনে Thames রিভারটা, Thames seems to lead to the uttermost ends of the earth, seems to lead into the heart of an immense darkness. So now you will learn plot analysis, text and plot analysis in lesson 2. Already I have told the summary that you have listened so far. So now let's get a plot analysis of Heart of Darkness. Throughout part 1 and 2 of Heart of Darkness, Kurtz is a shadowy figure whose name is dropped at different times and whose personality and importance eludes both Marlowe and the reader. Only after reading part 3, however, does Kurtz's overall importance become clear and Conrad's design show itself. The novel is about the meeting of two men, Marlowe and Kurtz, whose existences mirror each other. Ultimately, Conrad suggests that Kurtz is who Marlowe may become if he abandons all restraint while working in the jungle. Part 3 emphasizes Kurt's godlike stature to show why Kurt became what he did and how Marlowe retreats from this fate. Throughout part 3, Conrad stresses the absolute devotion that Kurtz inspires in his followers. The Harlequin, for example, speaks with enthusiasm. When speaking of Kurtz, he made me see things, he tells Marlowe and adds, you can't judge Kurtz as you would an ordinary man. This is an important statement because it reflects the idea that Kurtz feels he has moved beyond the judgment of his fellow men by abandoning himself to his innermost desires and lusts. Kurtz has achieved a godlike status in Congo among the savages. Note that this godlike status is not simply an illusion in Kurtz's mind, for the heads of neighboring tribes fall prostrate before Kurtz, and more surprisingly, the very natives being forced into slavery by the company attack Marlowe's steamboat because they do not want Kurtz to leave. দ্যাট মিনস সেই লোকাল কঙ্গোর নেটিভসরাও কুর্সকে গড হিসেবে দেখতো এবং কুর্সকে ভালোবেসেছিল, এতটাই ভালোবেসেছিল যখন মার্লো কুর্সকে ইউরোপে ব্যাক করে নিয়ে যাচ্ছিল তখন তারা সেই স্টিমশিপে আক্রমণ করেছিল। কেন? কারণ তারা চাইছিল না যে কুর্স ফিরে যাক, কুর্স তাদের এই কঙ্গো অঞ্চলকে ত্যাগ করুক। The sight later on of the three natives covered in earth and the wild women reinforced Kurt's godlike stature. He came to them with thunder and lightning, the Harlequin explains, and they had never seen anything like it, fulfilling what Conrad saw as the wish of many Europeans. Kurtz had established himself as a violent force, ready to extract vengeance on anyone who disobeys his commands. What Kurtz himself thinks of his own actions and kicking the earth to pieces is much more difficult to pinpoint. His final words, the horror, have elicited an enormous amount of critical commentary. Marlowe suggests that these words reflect Kurtz's supreme moment of complete knowledge, an epiphany in which Kurtz saw exactly what succumbing to his own darkness had done to him. অর্থাৎ মৃত্যুর আগে মানুষ যে উপলব্ধি হয় সে যে ভুল করেছিল সেই বিষয়গুলো থেকেই কুর্টস দুটো শব্দ উচ্চারণ করেছিল, দুটো ফ্রেজ উচ্চারণ করেছিল, the horror, the horror, the horror, the horror. Care should be taken, however, not to read Kurt's final words as an apology or deathbed retraction of his life. Heart of Darkness is not a fable, and one of his themes is that the darkness quoted by Kurtz is potentially in everyone's heart, not just the one belonging to this voracious demagogue. Kurtz may be commenting on the force for which he has given his life, or the fact that he will not live long enough to finish his great plans. Conrad's deliberately ambiguous choice of Kurtz's dying words allows for a number of interpretations while simultaneously refusing the reader the comfort he or she would feel in deducing Kurtz to neat categories and descriptions. Like Africa, Kurtz is mysterious, and the workings of his heart at his supreme moment remain mysterious as well. Still, the only character remotely aware of what Kurtz did and what drove him is Marlowe. অর্থাৎ মার্লোই সাক্ষী ছিল কুর্টস যা যা করেছিল তার কর্মকাণ্ডের, এবং মার্লোর মাধ্যমে আমরা কুর্টসের যে কঙ্গোতে ডার্কনেসের নেটিভদের সাথে যে কর্মকাণ্ড করেছিল সেইগুলো সম্পর্কে আমরা জানতে পারি, তার যে মোরাল ডিগ্রেডেশন হয়েছিল। আর মার্লো মূলত রাইটার জোসেফ কনরাডকে রিপ্রেজেন্ট করে। Which is why upon his return to Europe he finds the people there to be intruders whose knowledge of life is an irritating pretense. He finds them offensive because of their self-assuredness in their morals and belief in the inherent rightness of the civilization. The rightness Marlowe now scorns because he sees it, like the company's wish to bring the light of civilization into Africa, as a facade. ইউরোপিয়ানরা যে দাবি করছে যে আফ্রিকা অঞ্চলে তারা গিয়েছিল মূলত সেখানে সভ্যতা আনার জন্য, কিন্তু আসলে এটা ছিল তাদের এক ধরনের মুখোশ। তারা আসলে সেখানে অত্যাচার করে, সেখানে লুণ্ঠন করে সম্পদ আহরণ করাই ছিল তাদের মূল উদ্দেশ্য। This is why in the opening pages of his narrative Marlowe speaks of the Romans conquering England, which has been one of the dark places of the earth. Marlowe now understands that empires are not built without the kinds of activities he witnessed in the Congo, and that the civilization that is held in such esteem is in a sense just robbery with violence, aggravated murder on a grand scale, and man going at it blind. While Marlowe never wishes to abandon civilization in favor of the path chosen by goods, he can no longer view it with the same enthusiasm and comfort that he did before working for the company. Kurz has taught him too much. The final meeting between Marlowe and Kurz intended, dramatizes this conflict in Marlowe's heart. The intended Kurz fiancé in Belgium, who knows little about the real Kurz, contrasts Kurz's native mistress, the black wife of Kurz in Congo, who presumably knew intimately of his various lusts, and brings to mind the duality of Kurz's character. Dressed in mourning for over a year, she too suggests the complete devotion of Kurz's followers. For her he had died only yesterday. Her black mourning dress, ashen halo, and dark eyes bring to mind the numerous examples of light and dark imagery throughout the novel, except that here the images are more pronounced than anywhere else in the book. The intended darkness reflects her own sorrow at the loss of her love, but Marlowe attempts to hide a greater and more threatening darkness, the truth about goods. As Marlowe suggests to maintain his composure, he notices the physical and metaphorical darkness that permeates the room. He arrives at the intended's house at dusk. At the beginning of the conversation, he notices the room growing darker, and only her forehead remaining illumined by the inextinguishable light of belief and love. When she begins explaining that she knew Kurz better than anyone else, Marlowe comments, the darkness deepened, and in his heart Bose is dead before her. So কুর্সের যে ফিয়ন্সি ছিল ইউরোপে, সে কুর্সকে খুব বেশি বিশ্বাস করতো এবং কুর্সের আসল যে চরিত্রটা সেটা সে জানতো না, যার কারণে মার্লো তাকে কষ্ট দিতে চায়নি এবং তার আসল যে কুর্সের যে আসল মোরাল ডিগ্রেডেশনটা হয়েছিল সেটাও সে প্রকাশ করেনি কুর্সের সেই ইউরোপিয়ান ফিয়ন্সির কাছে, যার সাথে তার এঙ্গেজমেন্ট হয়েছিল ইন্টেন্ডেড। সো মৃত্যুর পরেও এবং তার শেষ দিন পর্যন্ত কুর্সের যে ইন্টেন্ডেড বা ফিয়ন্সি, সে তাকে সম্মান এবং ভক্তি করত এবং বিশ্বাস করত এবং ভালোবাসত অন্ধের মতো। The truth about Kurz, metaphorically represented in The Coming of Night, becomes more difficult for Marlowe to hide because the intended's presumed knowledge of Kurz becomes more unnerving to him as they continue. After the last glimpse of twilight fall, Marlowe even admits to feeling some dull anger at her intended. At her naivete, but this feeling turns to infinite pity when Marlowe realizes the immensity of her ignorance. This is why when asked to repeat Kurz's final words, Marlowe cannot bring himself to repeat, the horror, and instead tells a lie that gives great comfort to the intended while simultaneously securing Kurt's reputation. Despite the fact that Marlowe knows that lies are wrong, he cannot refrain from telling this one, because to do so would have been too dark altogether. As the intended gratefully receives Marlowe's lie, so Europe accepts the one it tells itself about building empires and civilizing savages. That's the end of week 4, lesson 1 and 2. And in the next video, we will learn lesson 3 and lesson 4. In lesson 3, major theme symbols and character analysis, and in lesson 4, racism and ethical issues in Heart of Darkness. Thank you very much. Don't forget to watch the next video with lesson 3 and 4 of week 4. Thank you very much. Bye bye.